When you talk about an all-party government, what are some of the unpopular decisions that we can expect from the president to get the country out of this mess?
Well, I think finding consensus, even before looking at the difficult decisions, will be a task on its own, because we know when we have an all-party government, it is not as easy to get everyone on the same page, and especially having a party with opposition members as well, to see their mood and their tone, now knowing that the executive president is Ranil Wickremesinghe, will be interesting to see, especially certain policy decisions in terms of economy and finances will sort of not mix well or gel well with certain MPs in Parliament. So that is something that we should really keep our eye out for, Priyanka.
Right, absolutely. Jehan, coming back to you, we saw unprecedented protests in Sri Lanka recently. People were chanting, "Gotta go home," for quite a many weeks that we've been reporting, of course, from Sri Lanka as well. So now that there is a new president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, how is all this going to pan out? People are saying that they're not going to take this move lying down.
I mean, the main slogan was "Gota go home," but it was not the only one. There was also "Ranil go home," and also 225. That's all the parliamentary. You also go home. Now, what I would really like to see is President Wickremesinghe, that he should address the concerns of those who protested, because it is not only that their slogans were not only that these various parties go home, but there are also some very good proposals they made. And the civil society has also made good proposals. I would like to see him take those on board at the same time as he addresses the economic issues and tries to unite the political parties together, get their support by forming an all-party government, bringing them in inclusive government, which includes the ethnic minorities. And it would be wonderful if we could actually get the main Tamil party into the all-party government, because the Tamil parties, for the last 70 years, they have only been part of the government for only about 2 years, in the 1960s. And since then, they've always been in the opposition. And if we could bring them into this temporary and interim all-party government to address national issues, including the Tamil issues, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely, Jehan. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks for all your inputs and joining us on WION at this hour.
Thank you.
Right, for all the viewers who are tuning into WION at this hour, let's just tell you what's happened in the last couple of minutes. Sri Lanka finally has a new president. The embattled nation has now elected Ranil Wickremesinghe. He's now the president. Sri Lanka's parliament has elected the Prime Minister and the acting president, Ranil Wickremesinghe, as the country's new president. Legislators had voted in a secret ballot on who would lead the country out of this deep political and economic crisis. However, since this was announced, protests have already erupted. As the new president was named, they've erupted across Colombo. Several protesters are opposing the move. They are opposing the election of the new president. This was feared all along. The big question, of course, is what are some of the big moves, the tough actions or decisions that the new president is likely to take over the next couple of days, as all eyes will be on Sri Lanka. Another big question is who will be the next Prime Minister? For all the viewers who are tuning into WION, these are visuals of the protests which have broken out as the new president was named. Sri Lanka's parliament elected Prime Minister and acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe as the country's new president. Legislators had voted in a secret ballot on who would lead the country, or who rather could lead the country out of a deep political and economic mess. Meanwhile, widespread unrest is expected in wake of the parliament electing Wickremesinghe, who is closely aligned with the Rajapaksa family as a new president. There are fears that the long arm of the Rajapaksa family is believed to be still very much at play, which is why protests have broken out across Colombo. Let's tell you some of the statements that were made by the new president addressing Parliament. The newly elected Sri Lankan President Wickremesinghe called for unity to embark on a way forward. All this is happening as the world has been watching the events unfold in Sri Lanka over the last few weeks. A crippling economic crisis where people were queuing up for basic commodities, leading to a complete vacuum in the political leadership after the president. The former president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa, fled the island nation, which was followed, of course, by unprecedented protests. The big question is, will Wickremesinghe be able to get the island nation out of the multiple crises that it is facing currently? And to answer some of these questions, joining us now is Sivakumaran Vipulananda, a senior Sri Lankan journalist and commentator. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about this big news development. Of course, Wickremesinghe is taking over the charge of the embattled island nation. What are your expectations from the president?
Yeah, I think this is the best choice Sri Lanka should have had at this time of crisis, because he is a seasoned politician who has been in parliament for several years. So, and also with there's a saying that he has not to deal with the international community, with the IMF and all those institutions. He would have been the best choice at the current time. So I think at least for this year, he should be given a fair chance to run the country, like a CEO at least, something like that. Without, I think all parties should cooperate so that he can recover the country, rescue the country out of the crisis, at least to some extent.
Right. Let's talk about the protests that we are seeing erupting around Colombo, in Colombo as of now. This was expected, and people are saying that there will be more widespread unrest in the next couple of hours. They are opposing this move of Wickremesinghe being elected as president. Tell us about that.
Yes, but the protests, I feel that among the protesters also there are different types of views. For example, if you see Reuters, one protest organizer, Chamira Detuage, has mentioned he's saying that their primary goal has been met, which is that Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa to exit. So they are saying that unlike Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Ranil Wickremesinghe is not a populist. He is known to be a ruthless pragmatist. So there are different views. So we have to wait and see how the protest movement of the Aragalaya is going to turn out as a whole. So it's like their main concern, it seems, that whether possible prosecution of leading members of the Aragalaya, that has to be, I don't know how the new president is going to handle, whether he's going to reconcile or have some negotiations, so that we have to wait and see.
Right.
So I hope that for his experience, Mr. President Wickremesinghe should be able to weather these challenges in the next few weeks. I hope I will be positive, but the protests are also a bit of a concern. You are right, but I feel that maybe things will fall in place gradually.
You're saying things will fall in place gradually. This after we saw protests take over the streets of Colombo. Fresh protests are starting right now. You're saying that there is a division among the protests and their views. So what lies ahead when it comes to the big tough decisions that the new president is expected to take to get the country out of these crises?
Yeah, of course, the big tough decisions are going to be for example, austerity measures he might have to take in the 2022 and 2023 maybe, so that might be a little bit controversial, I would expect. But protest, I won't say division, but I would say there are diverse views among the protesters about the new what is going to happen. So that's what I meant. So the main challenge is the economic crisis, and also if you notice the old issues the other governments have faced with the Sri Lankan Tamil issue. Of course, today the Wickremesinghe in Parliament invited even the Tamil leaders to join hands with him and support in the process. So I would say main thing is economy and the other political issues also. The UN, the United Nations, the human rights issues and all that are there.
The island nation is obviously looking towards an IMF bailout. What is the progress on that? What can you tell us about that?
Recently, IMF, if you see the wire reports, IMF has quoted saying that the technical level with the central bank level, their negotiations are continuing. And so I don't see any major, of course, there are conditions have to be met, but I think the process is going on from what I have read and what I have seen and what I have come to know.
I think there's a lot of criticism about Wickremesinghe being elected president, primarily because of his closeness to the Rajapaksa family, of course. What can you tell us about that, and how will that affect his presidency?
Yeah, that is going to be there. But if you look at the other way, in fact, he has. We can say he had played a role in driving out Rajapaksa also. So it will be a two-way debate, two-way opinion. So me or someone else can say that he actually. I mean, it's debatable, but it can be said that he got rid of the regime because he himself has contested against them in several occasions, and even in 2018, if you remember. There was a short time when he was Prime Minister, the Rajapaksa regime, Mahinda Rajapaksa was appointed Prime Minister, and he had gone through the lot of challenges with Rajapaksas also. So I would say it is a little bit unfair to say that he's a Rajapaksa proxy or something. I mean, being a professional politician he is, I think it's just a detractor's comment that is my opinion.
Right. What do you expect to happen in Sri Lanka in the next few days now that there is a new president? Do we expect any tough decisions when it comes to any kind of curfew or state of emergency that is likely to be imposed?
Already the state of emergency has been in place. So if the protests get out of hand, maybe the president has to take some measures to protect people's interest. Because the last time, 2-3 days, 4 days back, a section of the protesters, although it has been disputed by other section of protesters, they tried to storm parliament and there was a lot of tension in certain areas. So to protect law and order, you might have to take some tough decision. And also, there's a saying that in the social media, sometimes there are certain criticisms which are legally could be challenged. So there might be a little bit tough decision had to be taken. And also, he has to put together a cabinet, which the opposition is saying that cabinet should not have more than 10 ministers. So we have to wait and see how he is going to meet these requests.
Absolutely. This is a wait and watch game. Stay with us on this broadcast. We'll just get our viewers up to date with what's happened in the last 1 hour. A big news development coming in from Sri Lanka. The parliament elected Prime Minister and acting President Ranil Wickremesinghe as the country's president. Legislators voted in a secret ballot on who could lead the country out of the multiple crises that it has been facing. And since the announcement was made, multiple protests have broken out. More unrest is expected. People are criticizing the decision because of the fact that Wickremesinghe is believed to be close to the Rajapaksa family. Coming back to you now, our guest of the hour, tell us a little bit more about what is the situation on ground. What are your sources telling you about what we can expect to unfold on the streets of Colombo?
The protests could go on for some time. That is expected. But there is a feeling that the government also will assert itself. So because it has gone on so far. If you notice, there are so many things happened, but the Sri Lanka has carried on. So I think things should be. Despite the issues, only thing is the president has to take care of it doesn't get into some violent. The protesters also have assured that section of the protesters have at least they believe in the peaceful protest. So it has to be. We have to wait and watch, I would say.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for all your insights and inputs, and thanks for joining us on WION at this hour. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.